In the quiet hum of a morning market, just beginning to stir, dust danced in the sunbeams before the sleepy shops. Among the first signs of life was Yusuf, an elderly cobbler, already seated at his old wooden table. Time had softened the table's edges, much like it had whitened Yusuf's hair and etched deep lines of wisdom onto his face. The air around him carried the honest scent of old leather and glue, a testament to a life of hard work. He was a simple man, mending the worn-out shoes of farmers and laborers, his patient stitches granting them a few more days on the tough, unforgiving earth. His earnings were meager. Some days, after hours of toil, only a handful of coins would find their way into his pocket. But Yusuf's heart was as vast as the open sky. Yet, hidden within that vast heart was a deep, silent ache, a sorrow known only to God and his wife. Aisha, every evening, he returned to a home filled with a profound stillness. No children's laughter echoed off the walls. No small voice ever called him Abba or Father. In the village, whispers followed him. People looked at him with pity, seeing him as a tree that had withered before it could bear fruit. But Yusuf kept his pain locked away, always telling his wife, "Allah has surely hidden something better for us somewhere." One sweltering afternoon, as Yusuf wiped sweat from his brow, a shadow fell over his small stall. He looked up to see an unfamiliar young man, his clothes caked with the dust of a long journey, exhaustion plain on his face. Yusuf's gaze instinctively fell to the man's feet. His shoes were in ruins, the soles completely detached, leaving his feet exposed to the scorching ground. The young man offered a weak smile. "Uncle," he said, "my journey is long, my shoes are broken, and I haven't a single coin. Can you help me, for the sake of Allah?" Yusuf paused, looking at the traveler. He himself had very little, and was waiting for a paying customer just to afford a small meal for the evening. Yet a serene smile spread across his face. "Sit, son," he said warmly. "Rest a while. Provision is from Allah." He gently took the tattered shoes and selected the finest piece of leather he owned. With complete focus, he began to work, his dedication as immense as if he were crafting shoes for a king. With every tap of his hammer, a prayer quietly left his lips. The young man watched in silent astonishment, moved by the generosity of a man who possessed so little. Before long, the shoes looked almost new. Yusuf smiled and handed them back. The young man put them on, a wave of relief washing over him. "Uncle," he said softly, "I will never forget this kindness. Times may change, but goodness never fades." Without looking up from his work, Yusuf replied, "I made no deal with you, son. I did this for the sake of Allah." The young man departed, and silence returned to the small shop. But Yusuf had no idea that the shoes he had just mended were not just footwear. They were the first step in the greatest test of his life. A new and terrible trouble was descending upon the village, and it was about to threaten not only his small shop, but his very existence.
In the heart of an old town, there lived a cobbler named Arthur. He was a kind soul, but his pockets were nearly always empty. His tiny shop was tucked away in a forgotten alley, and customers were few and far between. Each day, he'd sit by his worn-out bench, hammering away at old leather, his stomach often rumbling a sad tune. Yet, despite his own poverty, Arthur's heart was full of compassion. He'd each share his meager crust of bread with stray cats and mend the shoes of poor children for free, his gentle smile being the only payment he'd accept. One biting winter evening, a fierce storm raged outside. The wind howled and the rain beat against his small window pane. Arthur was about to close his shop for the night when the door creaked open. A man stood there, drenched to the bone, his fine clothes soaked and splattered with mud. He looked exhausted and distressed. "Please," the man shivered, "my carriage is broken down, and I am lost. My shoes are ruined. Can you help me?" Arthur, without a moment's hesitation, welcomed the stranger in. He offered him a small stool by his weak fire and gave him his only dry blanket. He looked at the man's expensive, but now destroyed leather shoes. "These are beyond simple repair, sir," Arthur said softly. "But I have one last pair of sturdy boots I crafted. They are my finest work. Please take them. It would be my honor." The stranger was taken aback. "But I have no money to pay you now," he admitted, his face filled with shame. Arthur just smiled. A warm pair of shoes on a night like this is more valuable than any coin. your safety is payment enough. He helped the man put on the new boots, which fit perfectly. He then gave him directions to the nearest inn and a piece of the bread he had saved for his own. Dinner. The stranger looked at Arthur, his eyes filled with a deep, unspoken gratitude. I will not forget this, my friend. You have a good heart. With that, he braved the storm once more and disappeared into the night. Arthur went to bed that night with a cold room and an empty stomach, but his heart felt warm. Weeks turned into months, and life for Arthur continued its usual, difficult rhythm. He had almost forgotten about the stormy night and the stranger he had helped. Then, one sunny morning, a grand, official-looking carriage stopped right in front of his humble shop. The entire alley buzzed with curiosity. A well-dressed official stepped out, holding a scroll with a royal seal. He entered the shop and announced in a loud, clear voice, "By order of the royal minister, I am looking for the cobbler." Arthur, trembling slightly, stepped forward. He couldn't imagine what a powerful minister would want with him. The official unrolled the scroll and began to read a proclamation. It declared that Arthur, for his unparalleled kindness and generosity shown to a stranger in need, was to be appointed the official royal shoemaker to the entire kingdom. He would be given a new grand workshop near the palace and a handsome salary for life. Suddenly, another man stepped out of the carriage. It was the stranger from the stormy night, now dressed in the exquisite robes of a royal minister. He walked over to Arthur and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I told you I would not forget," the minister said, his voice warm with emotion. "A kingdom is only as strong as the kindness of its people. You, my friend, are the richest man I have ever met." From that day on, Arthur's life was transformed. He never had to worry about an empty pocket or a rumbling stomach again. But more importantly, he never changed. He continued to be the same kind, generous soul, always ready to help those in need. His story became a legend in the town, a beautiful reminder that a single act of kindness, no matter how small, can ripple outwards and change the world in ways you can never imagine. It's a powerful lesson that the true measure of wealth isn't in what you have, but in what you give. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales that inspire. See you next time.
Standing in that large hall of the palace, Hassan still could not believe that all of this was really happening to him. Just a few days ago, he was about to lose his small shop, and today a chest full of gold was placed in front of him, and important people were honoring him. Tears filled Hazen's eyes. He softly said that I am a poor cobbler. I only did what I felt was right. If I had even lost my shop to save the life of that little girl, I would still have had no regret. Wazir Ismail listened to him carefully and said with a smile that this is exactly the reason why you are standing here today. There are many rich people in this world, but those who are rich in heart are very few. Abdul Rahim stepped forward and opened the chest. Inside it were shining gold coins. He said that all of this is for you, but along with it comes a responsibility. Hassan asked with surprise what kind of responsibility. Abdul Rahim replied that from today, you will not work only for yourself, but for the entire village. In your new workshop, poor people will be given work so that no one remains hungry and no one is forced to cry for medicine for their children. Hassan immediately lowered his head and said that if Allah has given me this opportunity, I will fulfill it as a trust. Within a few days a new workshop was built in the village. Many poor people began working there. Farmers, laborers, and those who previously had no support now started working with Hassan. Hassan still wore the same simple clothes and spoke to people in the same humble way as before. The only difference was that now instead of a small shop, there was a large workshop where dozens of shoes were made every day. The people of the village no longer saw him as just a cobbler, but as a source of blessing. One day Hassan was sitting outside his workshop when he saw a woman walking toward him with a small child. When Hassan looked carefully, he realized that she was the same woman to whom he had given money in the market. In her arms was the same child whose life he had saved by selling his mother-ass necklace. The woman's eyes were filled with tears. She stopped in front of Hassan and said that if you had not helped that day, my daughter would not be alive today. The little girl was now healthy and there was a gentle smile on her face. Hazen's eyes also filled with tears. He placed his hand on the child's head and said, "Do not thank me. All of this is the mercy of Allah." The woman said that we poor people have nothing to give you except our prayers. Hassan smiled and said that there is no wealth greater than prayers. That day Hassan kept thinking for a long time about how a small act of kindness can change a person's entire life. If he had ignored that little girl that day, perhaps he would still be sitting in a broken shop. In the evening when he returned home, Zainab was waiting for him at the door. Hassan smiled and said, "Look Zainab, Allah has turned our small sacrifice into such a great blessing." Zainab looked toward the sky and said that when a person does good from the heart, Allah opens paths for him that he could never even imagine. Slowly the years passed, and Hazen's story became famous far and wide. People used to say that this is the story of a man who made the greatest deal in the world. He gave away everything he had to save a life, and in return Allah gave him a life full of honor, blessings, and peace. The lesson of this story is very clear. When a person helps someone only for the sake of Allah, the reward for that help never disappears. It may not return immediately, but one day it surely comes back, and often it returns much greater than before. So if in life you ever face a moment where you must choose between your own benefit and helping someone else, remember that a good deed is never wasted. Even a small act done for the sake of Allah can change a person's destiny.